There's Crazy Horse. The lady at Mount Rushmore told me where I bought my lemonade. She said, go now. If you're going to go, she said, because they're going to be closing it down where you can't go up there because they're going to start working on it, I guess, pretty hard here for long. And he said it'll be closed. She said it'll be closed for a while. So I thought I'd go ahead and see it today before I leave tomorrow. I have no idea where to park. I guess this is bike parking. I guess that's a good place to go. A lot of bikes here. Wish there was some shade. Park up here by me an old gold wing. Fans on. It's hot today. 88. They made us many promises, more than I can remember. They never kept but one. They promised to take our land, and they took it. Red Cloud.
Chiefs and I would like the white man to know the red man as great heroes also. Chief Henry Standing Bear wrote these words in a letter to sculptor Korczak Julkowski in 1939, opening the doors to a partnership and friendship that would result in the world's largest mountain sculpture and eventually the Indian Museum of North America and the Indian University of North America. Since before the first blast in 1948, the purpose of these endeavors was firmly established: to tell the story of the indigenous people of North America and provide a positive view of their culture and heroes. It was a vision that originated with Chief Standing Bear, was realized with Korczak and Ruth Julkowski, and continues today with many voices working together to fulfill that dream. But the dream didn't take root right away, as Korczak contemplated the invitation from the native elders. When that invitation came, Korczak, a self-taught sculptor, had launched a successful studio career doing commissioned sculpture in New England. He was honored to be asked to assist Gutzon Borglum at Mount Rushmore during the summer of 1939. Later that year, his marble portrait, Paderewski, Study of an Immortal, won first prize by public vote at the New York World's Fair. Chief Henry Standing Bear wrote to Korczak after reading the news stories. Chief Standing Bear was an educator and interpreter for the Lakota and hereditary chief of the Brule. In his early teens, he became one of the first Native Americans to attend Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, where he took on the name of Henry, chosen at random from a list of names. As a result of attending Carlisle, Standing Bear concluded that in order to best help his people, it would be necessary to learn the ways of the non-native world. He began to develop leadership skills like public speaking and writing. He realized that the battle for cultural survival was no longer to be waged with weapons, but with words and ideas. He spent most of his life working for the social progress of Native people. After receiving the letter, Korchak spent 2 years carving his 13.5-foot tall Noah Webster statue at his studio in Connecticut, then volunteered for Army service during World War II. He landed at Omaha Beach and later was wounded. When the war ended, officials asked the sculptor to make war memorials in Europe, but Korchak had made up his mind, convinced that the story of the American Indian was an epic that deserved to be memorialized. He would accept the Lakota elders' invitation and dedicate the rest of his life to the Crazy Horse Memorial. Moreover, Korchak promised that the mountain carving would be the focal point of a vast cultural and educational humanitarian project.
To carve a mountain to a race of people that once lived here for maybe 150,000 years? What an honor. A little Polish shepherd boy from Boston. What an honor. And that's all I ever thought of it.
Although Korchak originally wanted to carve the memorial elsewhere, the Lakota elders insisted their memorial be in the Black Hills, sacred to them for many generations. And the elders knew who they wanted to be the subject of the carving: the Lakota warrior Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse, Oglala Lakota, was born around 1840 near Rapid Creek on the edge of the Black Hills and grew up with the traditional ways of the Lakota, preparing him for his future life as a warrior for the tribe. He was not named Crazy Horse at first. He started out as Curly, possibly because he had wavy hair. Later, after he proved himself in battle, Curly earned his father's name, Crazy Horse, Tashunkawitko, which means his horse is crazy. In 1876, Crazy Horse led a band of Lakota warriors against Custer's 7th U.S. Cavalry Regiment. At the time, it was called the Battle of Little Bighorn, or Custer's Last Stand. Some Native Americans call it the Battle of the Greasy Grass. Many Native Americans look on that battle as a victory over a much larger force. After the battle, the U.S. government rounded up Northern Plains tribes that resisted. Crazy Horse continued to resist, and in 1877, under a flag of truce, Crazy Horse went to Fort Robinson, Nebraska. Negotiations broke down, possibly because of incorrect translations. As Crazy Horse was escorted to jail, he struggled and drew his knife, and his friend, Little Big Man, tried to restrain him. It's recorded that an infantry guard made a lunge with a bayonet and mortally wounded the great warrior. His parents transported him to his resting place, and the exact location is said to be a secret to this day. Chief Standing Bear and the elders were convinced Korchak was destined to carve Crazy Horse when they discovered he was born on September 6th. This was within hours of the date Crazy Horse died 31 years earlier. The elders saw the coinciding dates as an omen. Moreover, during his lifetime, Crazy Horse told his people he would return to them in stone. He often wore a protective stone talisman in his ear, depicted on Korchak's scale models. And so, in 1946, Korchak traveled to the Black Hills, and together, he and Chief Standing Bear chose the 600-foot mountain that would be carved. At first, he planned to carve just the first 100 feet, but the two men decided that the entire mountain would be needed to tell the story. The finished sculpture would be 563 feet high and 641 feet long. With that decision, Korchak knew he wouldn't live to see Crazy Horse completed. At that time, also, Standing Bear agreed with Korchak that the sculpture would not represent just one leader, but stand as a great symbol for the spirit of all Native Americans. When he moved to the Black Hills in May 1947, there was nothing but land and trees at the location. No water, electricity, roads, or money. Korchak lived in a tent the first 7 months while he hand-built roads and a place to live, making the log studio home from pine trees on the property. The dedication blast, June 3, 1948, was the only blast that year. Korchak single-jacked or hand-drilled the holes for the first blast, and it removed just 10 tons. The blast was touched off by Chief Henry Standing Bear, Korchak, and South Dakota Governor George T. Nicholson. 5 survivors of the Battle of Little Bighorn were among the special guests. Ruth Ross, a young volunteer who had helped raise funds for the Noah Webster statue back in Connecticut, had arrived in June 1947 to help with the memorial. She helped build the log studio home and the 741-step staircase up the mountain. Finally, work began on the mountain in 1949.
You imagine how humble I started with the mountain. I started with a single jacket, a hammer, and a steel. And I drilled my holes around 3-4 feet deep and blow them off. Then I bought an old compressor. It was 24 years old, an old Buddha, weighed around 4 tons. And I put a pipeline 2,440 feet long from the compressor on the ground up to the top of the mountain. So for the first 7 years, I climbed the 741 steps and I carried everything up on my back. When I go up, I start the big compressor. I used to crank it, and I put a 50-pound box of dynamite in one shoulder, put a wire, a string of discs around my neck. Then I put maybe an 8 or 10 or 12, 14-foot steel in my left hand, and that's how I shot up the mountain. The old Buddha, the old compressor, was kind of decrepit, and I just sometimes pull the way up, and I just hear that thing go kaput, 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 kaput. Put everything down, walk all the way down the staircase, start it up again, crank it up. Just start to drill one hole, get down about a foot, and you can hear the big Buddha kaput, kaput, kaput. Down I'd go again. One day I did that 9 times. This gets awful old. Oh, I tell you, that walk up and down there is terrible.
Ruth and Korchak married on Thanksgiving Day, 1950. The following year, Ruth helped her husband start drafting 3 books of comprehensive plans for all aspects of the mountain carving, ensuring that the work would continue. The couple built and operated a large dairy farm and lumber mill at Crazy Horse to help sustain Crazy Horse through the difficult early years. Every winter, they added a room or 2 to the visitor complex, which also housed their growing family, which would total 10 children, 5 girls and 5 boys. Everyone helped with the multitude of chores at Crazy Horse.
You see why we had 10 children. They were all, the boys were necessary up on the mountain, and the girls were necessary down here to help mother with the visitors. All I hope they'll ever have is strong back, good minds, and believe in living for other people. And since I started my life with just my hands, and all I ever think, I can only leave them the same heritage. It's up to them to make their own life.
I was bulldozing on the back side on one of the roads that we were building, and my dad was bulldozing down on the ramp lower, and the brakes went out of the cat, and I went off that edge, went over my dad, and the cat went all the way to the bottom, to the top of the muck pile, and I bailed out, and I went about 70 feet or so, I suppose, and my dad probably thought I was dead, but he turned around and looked, and there I was, dusting myself off. I landed in the only self pile of dirt in the mountain. And once he realized I was alive, he said, "You got it in there, you get it out."
Korchak and Ruth believed in a strong work ethic and not handouts. They were so passionate about the humanitarian purpose of Crazy Horse that Korchak twice turned down $10 million in federal funding for the project. He did not believe the government would carry out the important cultural and educational goals or complete the mountain carving. which he knew would take much longer than one man's lifetime. Korchak passed away October 20th, 1982. Ruth and their children carried on the work with the books Korchak and Ruth created together and the scale models as their guides. Ruth served as the CEO of the Crazy Horse Memorial Foundation and was actively involved for the remainder of her life, providing leadership, inspiration, and a steady guiding hand.
Korchak, of course, was in charge of the mountain and did all of that, and even though we planned the books together, without him, there wouldn't be a Crazy Horse, and I'm perfectly willing to give him all that credit. But he said before he passed away that he couldn't carve Crazy Horse from the grave, that there were things that we would have to do on our own, decisions that I would have to make. And one of the hardest decisions in the world, and it took 2 years to decide after he passed away, was that we were not going to carve the horse's head, which is what Korchak would have done. We were going to do Crazy Horse's face first. And he left it so that a big share of the rock was gone in front of the face, and we had to clear it down to the arm and get ready to go to work on it. But it was far more ready to work on than the horse's head was. And looking back on it now, I know we made the right decision.
The Indian's head emerged from the rock in the decade 1988 to 1998. Crazy Horse's head is 87 feet 6 inches high. Its dedication revealed the first finished work on the mountain. With a blast near Crazy Horse's left index finger that day, the focus of the work transitioned to the much larger task of blocking out the 219-foot horse's head. The outstretched left arm is 243 feet long. Crazy Horse's hand is 33 feet high. Over the next decade, work continued blasting out a series of benches, removing the millions of tons of rock from in front of the massive horse's head. As they drilled, blasted, and pushed the rock off from some of the biggest blasts ever on the mountain.
We're looking for people to come here and to be kind of a third generation. If you look at the family, we're to our fourth generation actually, but we see visitors on the porch who will come in with a youngster big by their hand and say, you know, my parents brought me here when I was this size. Now I'm bringing mine.
Ruth passed away May 21st, 2014. Progress of the dream, the mountain, and the humanitarian goals has continued with the second and third generation Jilkovsky family members, the foundation board, and dedicated management and staff.
The crew has really moved a lot of rock these past few years. The older crew members are passing on their knowledge to take all the precautions we need to carve the mountain. We stand on the shoulders of all the work of all the people that came before us. And we stand on Crazy Horse's shoulders, and Henry standing there, and Mother and Dad, and all the staff. We're just a stepping stone.